so glad you decided to do a documentary on it, because coming up, sometimes we hear in general, just don't get pregnant.
Just don't get pregnant.
Just don't go out and get pregnant.
Yes.
And also we haven't received the other information of, okay, this is when you need to get pregnant, that type of thing, Tell me, what made you decide to do a documentary feature on infertility?
It wasn't a decision, really. I kind of feel like the film found me. I went in for my annual gynecological exam, and my doctor, who's excellent Black woman, Ivy League educated and trained, looked at my chart and she said, "Ms. Lockley, you have a birthday coming up. Your eggs are turning 41. What do you want to do with them?" And whatever else she said, I don't know, because I blacked out.
At a moment.
I don't know. And she kept talking, great bedside manner, but I just kind of blacked out. I am a type A person. I know what I'm doing with life. I know where I'm going on vacation. I know what projects I'm working on. Like, I know these things. So the fact that she was asking me something that was important, and I had no clue what she was asking me, I didn't like that feeling. So I started researching, well, what does she mean? Like, what can I do with eggs? What does one do with them? And at the time, 7-8 years ago, nobody was really having this conversation, especially not people who look like us. So I started researching, and my goal was to do a 15-minute short that I could pay for myself, independent short docs. So I produce that's what I do in my real life, not direct. I'm a director by default. But I knew I could do like $1,000 per minute, and that like $15,000, and I could, do this short film to make sure that the girls I mentor, my nieces, the young women coming behind me, don't wake up at almost 41 trying to figure out what to do with an egg. And what happened is, if I would have this conversation with anybody while I was researching, they would say, well, this person, or this person's cousin, or this person. And it ended up that in my circle of peers, I knew someone really across the spectrum of reproductive health. And that runs the gamut from women who are child-free by choice all the way to women who need or require surrogacy to complete their families. So that 15 minutes that I thought I was going to do ended up being like 5 hours worth of interviews and footage, and other people had to help me pay for it.
Yes. And you know what? This documentary is so detailed. It has all kinds of information. It's very educational. It's very impactful. Makes you want to tear up sometimes when you hear the stories and you see the journey, and you can actually feel the pain of the women in the film, but you also rejoice with some of the results we see as well. Very educational. Now, I know, Robin, you're in the film as well. Being a therapist, I can imagine what you experienced, dealing with Black women.
It was such an honor to be able to be a part of it, and who knew that Chiquita's project would become this far-reaching. I always tell people there are certain people in my life that can call me and ask me to do jump rope, and I'm going to jump rope. So if Chiquita calls, I'm going to say yes, right? And so I had no idea the magnitude of it. But like I shared with you, this is a very personal journey for me. I'm the mother of 3 daughters, and I've been pregnant 5 times. So if you can imagine what that means, it's personal for me. Then as a therapist, of course, I have this topic, this reality across the gamut show up on my couch. If not weekly, every other week, somebody is dealing with the realities of this topic.
And the somebodies that come on your couch, and the many women that are in this documentary, but also we have like celebrities who are in your film who are open, and they talk about this. They're very open. Who are some of the people in the documentary? We have Keisha Pulliam, Andra Day, and Calais Stewart, and I'll tell you a little bit about each of them. So with Keisha Pulliam, we both went to Spelman. We are both Deltas, so that's how I know she's my special. So I call, when Robin says like I could call and she'll answer, Keisha's like that too. So I called Keisha and I said, okay, I need a narrator. I'm working on a film. It's a documentary, and I have no budget, and I need a narrator. So she was like, yes, send me the script. She had a podcast at the time, so she went and shot it when she did her podcast. What happened is Keisha ended up needing IVF. So she started taping herself, and she called and was like, well, this is happening. I'm going to self-tape. Let me know if you want to use it. Of course, we want to tell this story. And then COVID hits in the middle of her procedure, which had to stop. And part of what people didn't pay attention to when COVID hit,
You could go to the hospital for essential procedures, like a heart attack. You could go to the hospital. IVF was not considered an essential procedure. So wherever you were with that, you had to stop. You didn't get your money back. So if you paid $25,000, your shots have started, you've taken your test, they took your blood pressure, all of these body metrics that they have to take, you don't get your money back. So for some, and what she says in the film, what Keisha says is, like, who knew it was the price of a car, because that's how much it ends up costing. And there's not like an insurance plan that if the world stops and you can't go to the hospital, can you get your money back? So we have women across the gamut, middle class, upper middle class, who you don't know how they struggled to even get the money in the first place to pay for this. Right. And there was no insurance. So while the world was on pause, there was a certain heartbreak that was happening in this country. And that was with women, families, couples who their procedures stopped in the middle of all of it, and then what do you do? So I'm happy to say Keisha now has a bouncing baby boy, so that worked out. But so she's in it, and we took the time to show this story, not be just because it's her, but because this was happening to so many people, and it was like a silent. It was very silent. Nobody talked about it. So we have her. We have Andra Day, who is Oscar nominated, Golden Globe winning. She did a movie that most of us are familiar with now. Billie Holiday story. Yeah. Before she could do this story, if you are the key, like if you're in the one spot on a film, you have to get approval, like an insurance rider. And in order to do that, you have to go to your doctor, get the physical exam, and then they say, like, yes, you're healthy enough to do this film. She goes in and they tell her that because she has to lose a lot of weight in a short window of time, they could not promise her that she would have her fertility on the other side of it.
She said, you should probably freeze your eggs, because you're going to put your body through a lot of trauma, and you're 34 years old. And so that kind of shocked me because, when I was younger, probably like 2021, I really didn't have intentions of having children. And as I got older, I definitely developed a love for children, and I wanted to have my own kids. And I just assumed that I had time. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm good. I'm not worried about it. And so when she hit me with that, that's when I started to just kind of look up certain statistics. And then recently hearing more information about how fertility affects Black women was really, startling for me. I'm in it right now, and I definitely want to have kids, but I just want to make sure I'm informed.
So she was gracious enough to share her story with us. And then Kelly, a couple of friends, including Keisha, had mentioned her, like, you need to meet Kelly, and we just had never connected. One of her best friends called me one day and said, go on Instagram right now, go to Kelly Stewart's page. I go. Kelly is holding court, okay, in the middle of Instagram. There was a reality show where a doctor said you can't freeze your eggs if you were past like 30 or something. Kelly froze her eggs at almost 40 or like right at 40. And so all of the people were in her comments like, oh my God, am I having a, nervous breakdown today or not? Because this woman just said this on the show. And so Kelly was like dispelling some of those myths. Can you freeze your eggs at 40? You can. Everybody's body ages differently, so you have to go get your own test. She was fine, and most people have like 5 eggs or 7 eggs. She had like 20-something eggs, and she was almost 40. So it was important to just tell that story. Like, your body is not your body is not my body. We all age differently. Our bodies, like, you might be 20 and have low ovarian reserve. You might be 40 and have a robust one.
So the important thing is get to a doctor
and
let the doctor tell you what's
your
right
body.
For you. Your body. You have a slogan. You said, my eggs, my business. My eggs, my business.
Yes.
What does that mean, my eggs, my business? Because you break it down a little bit more in the documentary.
So at this big age that I am now, for 20 years, it doesn't matter if it was like Thanksgiving, the holidays, just with your friends, with their parents. Everybody wants to know, are you having a baby? When you having a baby? Or if you have one, they want to know, when you giving them a brother? When you giving them a sister? And really, that's nobody's business because you don't know somebody's journey. And I have, at this point, I have many friends. But at the time, I had a friend who, one of your sorors, she was on Facebook and said, basically, stop asking me this question, because people didn't know she and her husband had been trying. People didn't care. So if they see her bloated, maybe she ate pizza, a slice of pizza, and her stomach is a little bigger. Maybe she's 4 months into shots and injections to try to do IVF. It is nobody's business what somebody's doing with their eggs, their uterus. It's just nobody's business. And we ask this question Not from like a bad place.
Right.
When I was on with Gail King, that was one of the things she said. She's like, oh my God, I feel bad because I talk about this all the time. I ask people this all the time. So we're not asking it from like this malicious place. The reality is nobody's business. If it was your business, you would already know the answer.
Yeah.
So it was important for me to start the film with that. Like, if this is not about you and your eggs, don't ask this woman what she's doing with hers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My eggs, my business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put it on a
business.
t-shirt.
Put it on a t-shirt because that is something powerful.
Yeah.
Now, when women come to you, what are some steps that you give them? Because we talked about earlier how it's an emotional journey, you know, it's a painful journey, especially when you're trying and it's just not happening. And then sometimes you don't want to talk to people because you don't know who to talk to, who to share this story with, you know. What steps can you give a woman going through this?
Well, the very first step is just to create a space that the woman feels comfortable and free, a judgment-free zone that allows her to express where she is, right? So when you ask, how do you support someone, or the steps you give when they're going through it, that it could be a myriad of things. It could be so many things that they are going through. It could be that they are longing to give birth and have not been able to. What I'm really finding are women who are beyond what is considered the normal, I hate using that
Optimal
word.
age.
That's the best word, optimal age, and trying to figure out, what does that mean for me? Am I grieving the hope of a child? Is there still opportunity? So I'm creating a space. That's the whole heartbeat of my practice. Let me create a space where you can share without a filter. Watch this, without a filter, you can share openly just where you are, because so many of us internalize, and I promise, when you stuff, it's going to come out somehow. It comes out with irritation toward your spouse. It comes out with irritation toward other children, with friends. It comes out. So I'm just creating a space so that you can say, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I am afraid of. And this is what I'm really longing for. That's where we start.
Right. And you said, you mentioned the word spouse in there. So you have a couple and they're going through this. What would you share, or advice would you give a couple to say, let's not fight each other? Because tensions can get high, but how do we work through this?
Now you are touching on an area.
That's her
Amen, somebody.
That's my area. And let me say what I would want to communicate to that spouse. I would particularly want to communicate to the husband or the partner. I would want to say that the process of attempting to have a child, the journey of motherhood, is intense, and while it happens often, it is not a quote unquote normal experience. This is a miracle, and it requires all of who that woman is, even if she is adopting. It requires all of who she is. And so what I would want, if I could create what would be optimal for me, is that man or that partner has their own mentor, because they have their own realities, they have their own challenges, they need their own space, but someone that could support them so that they could be fully supportive of the woman. Because unfortunately, if I could say what's an epidemic that's taking place, it's that women, even within their own, now my passion is marriage, so you keep hearing me say that terminology, women within the sanctity of their own marriage are having to not only fight their emotional realities, they're having to fight the emotional realities of their partner. And that's heartbreaking to me. And so that process you heard me say mind, body, and spirit. You need all aspects of who you are centered on creating this reality. You need support from your partner.
Yeah, go back and say that again, rewind if you could. You said they're fighting the emotional support. Say that one
so the woman is dealing with all that comes with the process of attempting to have a child. And what we have to understand, like Chiquita just said, we don't know how many times she's attempted. We don't know what the story, I love talking about this, the story she's telling herself. There's so much going on with her. But her partner has their own emotional realities as well. And my heartbeat is for women and for couples, but that man has his own emotional realities as well. Often his own fears that he hasn't even been able to articulate.
Yes.
So I am not wanting to minimize what he is experiencing. I'm just saying through this process, let's get him a therapist. Let's get him a big brother. Let's get him a pastor. Let's get somebody who is walking with him so that he can then be emotionally available for her. And what does that look like? Encouragement, letting her know that I love you regardless of what's happening. I love you regardless of what the outcome is going to be. We are in this together. You're not fighting this by yourself. One of the things you heard me say on the documentary is that we were not created for Isolation Island. That's
good.
What I need to put on a t-shirt.
I'm gonna write that.
We were not created for Isolation Island
Island.
because so many women fight private battles by themselves. They go inward because when they've tried, because that strong black woman idea or that superwoman idea, when you try to be vulnerable, especially when you're type A women like you and I, when we show vulnerability, it's brushed, girl, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Child, everybody deals with that. And so when that happens, what do? Oh, okay, I don't have a safe space. And so we fight so many private battles because of shame, because of fear, because of the story that we have created or that has been created for us. I could go on and on, so I'll stop here. I just want women to not do it by themselves. It doesn't have to be hundreds of people. Get you a solid 3 or 4. Build your team. I call it an advisory board. Build your team of people that are insulating you as you go through this process.
Yeah.
You see why we had to have her in the film?
I see why you had to have her in the film. I see why you had to have this documentary. And although it's been out for a little bit, it is important that this story continues until as many women that needs to see this film sees it. So guys, I'm going to encourage you, be sure to see Eggs Over Easy. Now, before we leave, I like to do Mythbusters. I'm going to do a little true and false with the two of you.
Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
Okay.
So, all right. So first myth, true or false? Black women are less likely to experience infertility.
That's false. And you can pull the studies. We are twice as likely to experience infertility and half as likely to get treatment. So you do have like some right numbers, but they're in the wrong spots. So twice as likely to experience infertility, half as likely to seek treatment. Partly because of the shame of it, partly because historically we're like fertile myrtle. That's the trope, the fertile myrtle trope. We're supposed to be able to do this naturally. So there's a shame attached to not being able to do it. So we don't go to the doctor. The other part of it is financial. We feel like if we need to have help, we can't even afford to do it. And then when you look at us making like it fluctuates 58 to 61 cents on the dollar of white men. So that's already like a financial hurdle. And then just the cost is so extreme for a lot of women. So if I can't pay for the services I need, why even go? So twice as likely to have infertility, half as likely to get treatment.
Wow. Yeah. True or false? Infertility is primarily a problem for older women, so it doesn't affect young black women.
Well, we know that is a myth. It's false. You know what's interesting? When I was ready to start having a child, I was 5 years into my marriage, and I got married relatively young, so I had to be about 32, I guess, when I started preparing to have a child, maybe a little younger than that. And I could not get pregnant. I could not get pregnant, and we were trying, and the doctor told me, you have a year to try to get pregnant, and then we need to start some type of support. And so I got pregnant within that year, but that time for me was very overwhelming. We missed a word that we have to make sure we say, even when we talk about that question, there is a trauma attached to this reality for us, and it's a trauma that goes way back into the times of slavery, right? And as people of color, and particularly black people, black women, we have to understand how that trauma-based reality is even fused into I know I keep saying it, the stories we tell ourselves, because a lot of them are subconscious, that fertile myrtle. If I can't get pregnant, what do we say? what is wrong with me? So then that begins to further this idea of shame, right? And that comes from, we could spend a whole nother session talking about the trauma of this process, but when we believe that infertility is not happening to young Black women, then we continue to spread that narrative that something is wrong with me. And that's why I loved Quita saying, when we start talking to each other, when we just start talking, and it doesn't have to be on Facebook. It can be, but it doesn't have to be on Facebook. Just pull a sister to the side and say, girl, I gotta ask you a question. You'll be surprised at how open she becomes. So create some spaces so that we can shine a light on those dark places in our life, so that we can have the light that's needed to do what we long for.
One thing Robin said, what is happening to me, I think we need to put a pin there. Most of the time when we go in for testing, it starts with the woman, what is happening to me. She's asking that because we focus on women, but the numbers are 1/3 of infertility is female, 1/3 is male, and 1/3 is couples. So why when we're like, what's wrong with me? It might not be you.
It may not be you.
It's only a 33% chance that it's
I
you.
kid you not. My second
It may not be you, sis.
The second, this true or false right here, infertility is solely a female issue.
Yeah,
so
no.
Black men don't experience infertility
Absolutely
problems.
not. Absolutely
False all day long.
False.
And tomorrow too.
And
Not tomorrow too.
and tomorrow and the next day. One of the things that was so telling, I did not, and it was a surprise things that happened from this documentary. Men were tuned in. That was not our target audience. It's Black women and fertility. So we never expected this conversation with men. They filled up my DM. So we did a live with a couple of men who were part of the equation. And there is a different type of shame that Black men carry when they are dealing with infertility. Yes, we have our thing, and it's historical, and it does go back to slavery. Black men, they were bucks back then, and they were you could buy them for more money, just like a woman who was of reproductive age. They would pay more money for them if they were fertile as well. All of the masculine, I don't want to call it toxic masculinity, I would just call it masculinity, and you could put whatever tag you want to put to it. But they don't even get, they don't get to cry about it, they don't get to be upset about it. So a dear friend, she and her husband, their infertility, although she was tested for months and months and months, and it wasn't her. He had a low sperm count. We don't have this conversation because men can't have a low sperm count. So we don't have the conversation at all. And it wasn't her, it was his sperm count that was low. And she has a book out, but she uses a different name to make sure that he still is safe within, she could tell the story, but still keep him safe. And that was what they chose to do. But the fact that we don't even think about it. We don't put them in the equation at all whatsoever.
Yeah. Absolutely. It takes somebody to point it out, a doctor to say, well, it could be something else going on. Powerful ladies. Any final comments, final words?
I'll let you go, Quita, since this is your documentary, and then I'll support.
This is our documentary. A final word, I would just say ask early. That's what we implore everybody. If you have girls in your life, give them the words to ask their doctors. Like, if a girl is in bed one day a month because her period is so bad she can't get out of bed, that's not normal. In our culture, it's normal, but that should not be happening. You should not have debilitating cramps. And I was like 40 when I finally figured that out. Give her the words to ask the doctor. I am in bed with cramps one day a month, so that means I lose 12 days per year. Over the course of a decade, that's 120 days out of my life that I don't get to have because of this. So when we give them words, they can ask the doctor early. You don't have to be 40. You can be 18 if this is the issue you're having. So ask early. And then for doctors, pay attention. Like, I know doctors only get 10 minutes with their patients, but pay attention to what they're saying. And instead of saying, how do you want to, do you want birth control? Ask them, do you ever want to have a child? Do you have plans to have a baby ever? Instead of defaulting to what contraception do you want to use? Ask them a broader question, because you might get an answer that will help them down the line.
Yeah, educating, empowering yourself. Make sure you get information.
Self-advocacy.
So you'll know what to ask when you go there, but also making sure you have a doctor that listens to you, that you can hear. Just because so-and-so went there and they've been going there for all the...
Means nothing.
Find a doctor that's right for you, that will listen. We talked a few minutes ago, and I'm going to jump on this for a second. about doctors believing women of color when we say that we're in pain and things like that, and sending home pressure cups.
Yes.
With that package of diapers they give on the way home, that goodie bag, so to speak. Adding things in there that will help
save a life.
Save a life. So.
Well, the last thing I would say is kind of with the idea of ask. One of the things that I have an acronym that I share with many of my clients is just ACT. And this goes across the board for any area, but particularly for this conversation, the acronym is ACT, and A is advocacy. Advocate for yourself, but also have someone that can advocate for you. I don't like people to go to the doctor by themselves. Have somebody there with you who's willing to advocate for you. Bring that friend who always has something to say. Bring that friend who you're normally like, girl, be quiet. No, she needs to be with you at the doctor, right? So advocate for yourself and have somebody advocate with you. The C is create safe spaces. Create safe spaces where you can be honest about what you're feeling and that people can help you navigate, and then tell yourself the truth. Because what often happens with Black women in particular, or women of color, we are so used to being resilient. We're so used to carrying heavy loads. We're so used to being the martyr. We're swooping in with our cape that we don't even tell ourselves the truth about what we're feeling and what we are experiencing. So you cannot change what you don't acknowledge. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. So as long as you continue, this is what I tell people, you are doing what you saw grandmama do or what you saw mama do. I'm from Texas, we say auntie, what you saw your auntie doing, but your grandmama and your mama and your auntie are sitting on my couch because they're exhausted, worn out, and broke down. And so I know you saw them being strong, and they are. They're amazing.
Maybe they had to.
They
for the
had
time
to
that
be.
Yes.
They are amazing and they are resilient, but they would tell you, sis, sit down and rest. So tell yourself the truth. So advocate for yourself and have others advocate for you. Create safe spaces and tell yourself the truth.
Tell yourself the truth.
A word.
I love that. Well, my mom, I used to go to the doctor with my mom, and the doctor one day said, do you have any questions? And my mom's answer was, well, she's on her way. She's talking about me.
The questions are on
her way.
The questions are on the way.
Before I got there, she told me that story. So definitely have
love
somebody.
that.
Yes.
Guys, you've got to see this documentary. It is powerful. It is life-changing, and share it with all the women and the men in your family, the men who will watch. But it is a must-see. If you have a young, teenager, let them see this documentary. It's very educational. It's very, very educational, and you won't be sorry. Ladies, thank you guys so much for joining us. Robin May, life coach, therapist, Chiquita Lockley, producer, writer, director.
Director by default. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You did a wonderful
Thank you for having
job.
us.
Thank you.
Guys, always remember to be kind to yourself and others.